Do not let a single person ever tell you you cannot do something.
What you're about to hear is a conversation with Randall Kaplan, co-founder of a $30 billion tech company, early investor in Google and Lyft, and a world-class podcaster.
In this episode, we uncover the mindset that took him from broke and bullied to building multiple billion-dollar businesses.
We also cover the biggest lessons he's learned from interviewing names like Mike Tyson, Tony Robbins, Dana White, Kevin O'Leary, and so many more.
So, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, or you're just looking for some inspiration to start playing at a higher level, then this episode of BSU is for you.
Randy, if you had to sum up everything you've learned about business in one sentence, what would it be?
If I could sum up everything I've learned about business in one sentence, it would be pursue your dreams, follow your passions, don't let anybody tell you you can't do something, and that anything is possible.
And you say anything is possible, but how is anything possible?
I mean, think about all the amazing stories in life and in business. I mean, think about our health, for example, when someone is on their deathbed or has stage 4 cancer and they've got 4 months to live and they end up living another 40 or 50 years. In business, I can't tell you how many times I've been told, you can't do that. It's not possible. Think about all the amazing companies that started where Fred Smith, FedEx, writes a paper at Wharton, and they said, that's the dumbest idea. I think you got a D on that paper. And it revolutionized the delivery market when back in the day you thought, okay, delivering packages overnight anywhere in the world seemed like the craziest idea in the world. So I think through a lot of things that you do, hard work, persistence, and of course, we're going to talk about extreme preparation, anything is possible. And obviously, there are some things at the margin that are not possible, but anything is possible as a mindset. It's my motto. And I really believe if you set your mind out to do something and you make the appropriate plan, you put in the appropriate work, and you figure out how to get from A to Z in your endpoint, anything is possible.
Yeah, and you are living proof that anything is possible. I do want to jump right into this concept of extreme preparation. You're repping it on your t-shirt for those listening. He's got it loud and proud for everybody to see. You're writing a book about it. You are giving a TED Talk about it that's about to come out. What is extreme preparation in your own words?
Extreme preparation is a new way to prepare for anything you're doing, a meeting, a speech, whatever it is that is on your agenda, preparing in a way that people haven't thought about before. It's a systematic, disciplined approach that allows us to dramatically increase our win rate, to achieve results faster, to accomplish what otherwise wouldn't have been possible and what people think is impossible. It's based on the belief that we can't control the outcome of things and we can't even control our intelligence or talents. But what we can control are the inputs, the process, and how we prepare for what's next. And it all starts with a plan.
I love that. I've heard you say a quote before that's really stuck with me, and it's that you don't necessarily ever want to be the smartest person in the room, but you always want to be the hardest worker in the room.
Yes.
And I feel like hard work and extreme preparation go hand in hand here.
They do. And when I tell people what is involved with extreme preparation, they get intimidated sometimes. God, I'm preparing 10 hours for a meeting, and you spend 25,000 hours studying, and that's 17 years of schooling from kindergarten through college. And people on average spend between 15 and 30 minutes preparing for an interview that will largely determine how they live. And instead of doing the work, they approach key moments with hope. They hope the meeting goes well, hope they remember the right words, hope their experience is enough. But hope isn't a strategy. And extreme preparation is, and anyone can do the work for 10 hours for a meeting. Anyone can do the work for 5 hours. You actually want to do it because your competition isn't doing the work. And so it's actually very simple to think about. It's not intimidating. It's just a function of putting in the work. You do research in advance. If there's 87 Google results, you read every single one. And what's interesting about it is in the last piece, it could be number 87. It could be that one little nugget that differentiates you from everybody else in showing people you've done the work. And when you do the work, great things happen. People respect you more. And you always want to start off the meeting with what I call an EPT, extreme preparation tornado, which means you're blowing someone off the chair on the first question, the first thing you say, because they say, wow, how'd you know that? That's incredible. And it starts things off on a different level and it stays there for the rest of your meeting.
Wow, that is really cool. When did you first discover the power of extreme preparation?
When I was a kid, I stuttered. I could hardly speak. I went to a speech therapist 3 days a week. I learned a new way to talk, and it really taught me. It took years and years and years. And there's a moment in my life where I was in high school and I was working with a speech therapist, and we drove up to a McDonald's drive-thru and I said, "May I please have a hamburger?" And that was a huge moment for me. For most people, that's nothing, but for me, it was everything. Because it really just changed things. And I really said, gosh, you do all the work and the struggles that I had to get through to be able to communicate and speak. And so much of our success is being able to communicate and have conversations. And it was embarrassing to start. I mean, everyone would laugh at me. I'd give a speech and I was very shy and I didn't like to talk. So just doing all that work. And then in the classroom, I also noticed that the harder you study, it's linear to the results that you get. And I do a lot of coaching and professional coaching from students through CEOs and founders and athletes with huge contracts. And it's really if you do the work. And in the classroom, I remember being in the sixth grade, I studied really hard, didn't have a lot of friends. It was hard to have friends when you stutter and you're this awkward. I was a very uncool kid. But I remember putting in the work and I remember getting the transcripts and it was all printed out on a computer. It was A. And I thought, gosh, wow, that's amazing. And part of my coaching is I tell people in college, it's easy to get straight A's at the margin. You just got to put in the work. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but the hardest person in the room gets the best grades. And it's just a function of doing the work. When I see a resume with a 3.2 or a 3.3, unless someone is working full time or they're playing college sports or something, to me, that's an underachiever because to me, it says they're not putting in the work. In the classroom, in education, you put in the work, you're going to get the grades, all other things being equal. And of course, there's always exceptions to that rule.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I struggled in high school and I went into college with that mindset of I'm going to work harder than everyone else and ended up having a 3.95 GPA and graduating summa cum laude. So I was living proof that how hard you work is definitely a linear approach. I want to go now to
Well, congratulations on that. I understand what it takes. And just so people know, I mean, I'm sure you did the same thing. I was in the library and I studied in the law library, University of Michigan, greatest school on earth, which is this amazing, Gothic, inspiring building. And I remember being there on nights where I had nothing going on, no tests the next day till 9, 10 o'clock every night. And even Thursday night, which was bar night, we'd all go to this bar called Charlie's or Rick's. I remember I'd go there till 8, 9 o'clock at night. I'd go home and I'd change. And I was the only one in there. There were 10 people in that law library who were there on a regular basis, and every single one, all 10, 10 for 10, have had monstrous careers. And again, it's that if you think about a spire at the top of a building, it gets thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. Yeah, there's 100-story building, and it's hard to get to that top floor. But think about that 30-foot spire that goes to a pinpoint, like a pin where it would cause blood on your finger. It's the people who are putting that kind of work, whether it's in the classroom or any meeting, speech, whatever you're preparing for, those are the people that are going to have a 99.99% success rate.
Yeah, I'm with you. I want to go to post-college now because similar to you, we both studied something in college that we actually didn't really love and have a passion for, right? So for me, it was accounting. You went on to get your law degree, right? And then you moved out to LA and you started practicing law, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you call it that, I was a 3-time loser lawyer in 8 months, but I did practice a little law.
I want to go to that part of your story and talk about how extreme preparation got you from being super unfulfilled in a career to finding your path and your way in a career that you loved.
I've been basically thrown out, fired from 2 law firms, and now I'm looking for my 3rd job in 8 months. And I figured, this isn't really working too well. I got a job. The market had started to recover a little bit. So I got a job with this firm in Chicago, another large firm based in Chicago called McDermott. And they asked me if I would do tax work. And I thought, gosh, that really sucks. But maybe people will think I'm smart if I'm doing tax work. I had 2 great bosses, by the way. I love them. They were great. But shortly after I got there, I said, all right, this isn't working. So in the spirit of extreme preparation, I said, all right, I'm going to make a list of 300 CEOs, do research on them, and then write them letters asking for advice. And that's exactly what I did. Every single person said, thank you. Every single person said, people are never going to meet with you. I mean, CEO of Disney, Viacom, every studio in town, 50 public companies. And I said, well, we'll see. And here's a great lesson too. When people say that something isn't possible, and people call me stupid. They said it's a total waste of your time. It's never going to work. And at the end of the day, if you have a belief in yourself and you do the work and you put the work in, things can happen. Another example, what was the probability of success that one of these people would meet with me? Less than 1%. I got 80 meetings.
Wow.
Eli Broad was one of the meetings. And this is actually part of the story as well. You need to be resourceful. And back then, there was no Google. And so our firm had a subscription to something called LexisNexis. And LexisNexis is a great tool. It's expensive. You can look up legal cases. You can find information. It has publications and newspaper and magazine profiles, and it would go back 20 years. And so in this LexisNexis subscription, the firm paid one rate, and it was a profit center for them. So I'm not sure what they were paying, $50K a month or something. But when you went into it and you signed on, you had to charge it to something. So I charged mine to client dev, and I made a list of 300 CEOs on Excel, taught myself how to use that in a very simple, basic way. And then I would print out every piece profile written with respect to these 300 people. And I remember Sue Mangers coming into the office. She was the manager of the firm at that time. She closed the door and she said, can you please explain this $40,000 client dev bill that I just got? And of course, the firm wasn't spending money on this, but this is the value of the searches that I did. And I looked at her with a straight face and I said, client development. I'm good with people and I think I can bring in business. And she looked at me for a long moment and she said, okay. And I soon got out of there. And then a few months after, I left because Eli Broad, through the research I did, was on my list. He was one of only 3 people at the time who started 2 Fortune 500 companies. Coffin and Broad, the home builder, was the first. Sun America was the second. And through your research, you learn all these nuggets. And this was a nugget that was buried down there. He had a job, assistant to the chairman. And that was the perfect job. I didn't want to go back to business school. I wasn't going to test well. I didn't have the work experience necessary. And so I figured, all right, this was the big one. And the big one was, I'm going to go in there prepared. So I studied like a maniac. I practiced the job interview in the mirror. I mean, it was not a job interview. My letter said, I want a meeting asking for an informational interview. I appeal to people's success and goodness of wanting to give back and wanting to take a meeting with somebody who was hungry and motivated. And every single CEO said, I've never taken a cold meeting like this in my life. And it was because my letter was better than any they had ever received. It showed my research. It was tabbed. It had a quote on the cover page with the cell phone cover. It had my transcripts from Michigan and Northwestern, a letter of recommendation. I was part of this online TV program in Michigan. It was one and done. But hey, I was on it, and this newspaper wrote about it, and then I was a host of a dating segment, a fake day with my friend Jennifer Nyberg, and it was spiral bound. There's another lesson here, and I made those letters with the help of the mailroom guys. And I was probably one of only 5 lawyers in the firm that knew the names of any guys that worked in the mailroom. But it's cool. I'd bring them food. We'd hang. And when all the partners went home at 6, 7 o'clock at night, I'd be hanging with the guys in the mailroom as they're flipping these letters for me, putting them together for me. And they did it because they liked me and because I treated them well. And even today, when I have a summer an intern program that I've had for a very long time, I tell all the interns, and I tell this to everybody, you should know the names of the custodian or custodial who is working in your building, who's coming to fix the lights when the lights go out, who's going and vacuuming the floor and putting away the trash when you're not there at midnight, because most people don't. I think it's a mistake today that people will know the names of their bosses or people that work at the company because that's what you need to do. But I think it's just as important, and sometimes even more important, to know the names and treat everybody well for people who you think can't even help you. And
Yeah.
this happened to me. I was actually in Las Vegas. I was staying at one of the hotels, and these guys, you need a key card to get upstairs. The elevator, they just not. Everyone ignores these people. So I didn't one day. I said, "Hey, thanks. You're working hard, really great." And I said, "By the way, is this your full-time job?" I just started talking because I wanted to, and I could see everyone passing the guy. And he says to me, "Here's $100 gift certificate you can use at any restaurant in the hotel." And I asked him, "Why?" He said, "'Cause you're the only person in 3 days who stopped to say hello and ask me about myself."
Wow.
What does that tell you? But it was the same thing. So these guys in the mailroom, they helped me, and those 300 letters, I mean, my second bedroom in my apartment was a letter writing factory where I would print out these 5-inch stacks of paper. There were profiles on people. It had a note card on top with their name, and then I read all the research. I incorporated all that into my letter. But Eli had this job, and I went in there and I dropped off my letter because he was in the building right across the street, and the meeting went well. And he told me about this job, and I said, "I know about the job." And I named all 5 people who had the job, the years they had it, what they were doing with the career then, what they did at the company, and he just sat there, and he was just blown away, question after question. He asked me 14 questions, everyone was on my list. Then I had 20 questions for him, and he questions from the footnotes of Sun America's financial statements regarding
Wow.
accounting principles. I had no idea what they meant. It took hours to research and even know what I was talking about. So how many people have ever asked a question like that of him? Nobody. And my goal was to be the most prepared person who had ever stepped foot in that room. That was the goal. And the goal was to blow someone off their chair with the research in any meeting. And that's something I teach and coach as well. Don't be average, be different, be unique. So he said to me at the end of the meeting, "I'm not making promises, but I want you to take one class at UCLA, accounting class." Now I'm working 6, 7 days a week at my law firm, so I got to do this at night. I left his office, ran back to the parking garage right across the street. It was 5 levels down. I was in a suit, sprinted down to my car, drove to UCLA, double parked, got a catalog, ran back to my apartment, typed a thank you letter, dropped it off at his office. 57 minutes.
Wow.
Now, there's a lesson in there for people too. I could have done it the next day. I could have done it later this afternoon. I could have sent it 2 or 3 days later. One of the things I teach and coach is also do it now. So why would you wait to send a thank you letter? And just think about the impression. If you're the boss, you're sitting in there and you give someone just an ounce of hope. And once again, what are the chances that a loser lawyer with 3 jobs in 8 months, who's interviewing with a Forbes 400 person who started 2 Fortune 500 companies from scratch, is going to get a job working directly for him and reporting to him? Is close to zero as you can get. So you got to do everything you can to show that you want the job, that you've done the work. And I'd already done the work in the meeting, blew him off his chair in the meeting, and then I blew him off his chair again with the return. Right? I got that catalog back, and it's those stamps, it's those marks, it's those getting it done and doing what no one else had done. There's advice today of people. My daughter went to Cornell, and she did really well there, and they taught her in the placement office that you should write your thank you note within 2 days. That's the worst piece of advice I think I've heard from any college counselor in the history of the world. Why would you wait an hour? Why would you, if you're even in a meeting, I mean, just go bring a handwritten note beforehand, go downstairs, have a cup of coffee, drop it off in 60 minutes. There's a clock on my desk. No. Right? That's what people should do. And my friend Brad Keywell sent this to me. And it's genius. It's what I believe in. It's what I've done my whole career. So long story short, on my 27th birthday, Eli hired me. And that job changed the course of my life forever. And it happened for one reason only: extreme preparation.
Wow. I think if we ended the podcast right here, if we ended this episode right here, people have enough to chew on for a long time. I mean, I know I do that. There were so many lessons in there, but I think the through line is, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, it's you need to stand out. And the way you stand out is whenever you approach anything that you want to do, give it more than you ever thought that you could. Because I feel like for me personally, what I'm taking away from this is you think you did a lot until you hear the story and you're like, holy shit, there was so much more I could have done. Like you go to this place that it literally knocks people off their seats. And it's the first time I've ever come in contact with it. And it's just amazing.
I prepared for that meeting 40 hours. I practiced the interview in front of my bathroom mirror for 90 minutes on 3 separate days. I quizzed myself on the questions. I had this, and I wish I could find it somewhere. I had one of these, and by the way, I found this as a relic in my drawer the other day, Akamai. So I printed out one of these, and I didn't have the cardstock. So I bought a regular piece of paper at Staples, nice and thick, so it wouldn't bend. And then what I did is I had a cheat sheet like you did in college. Not that you cheat, but right before, you start and you look at the test, you're like, okay, last minute, then you close the book, right? So what I learned in all these meetings that I had is you're the least important person that they are going to meet with the entire day. They have business meetings, they have, you're waiting. And I often waited a long time. And you're nervous. I was very nervous. I had no business experience. I'm meeting with all these huge CEOs and founders of public companies. And so I'd sit there and I'd study while I'm in the waiting room. And it was 2 pages. So I had this printed as small as I can on 6 font with all my questions. And then I laminated it. And it was laminated on both sides. So I'd sit there, okay. And then I'd quiz myself. And that's what I did. Wow. And at one point, so this is something that I've never told before. So I'd done this, I learned a trick kind of whipping this out of my suit jacket. And in Eli's meeting, I kind of just went like this and I took it out and I glanced at it, not because I needed it for the memory, because I wanted him to see it. He said, "What is that?" He said, "Let me look at that thing." And he said, "Wow." And you want to engineer a wow. That's the whole point of these meetings. And you said something interesting. You want to do more. You don't want to do more. You want to do fucking more. You want to do 10x more. You want to do 100x more. Because if you're the most prepared person for whatever you're doing, you're going to have outstanding results. If I'd prepared 5 hours for that thing, I have no idea what would have happened, but I wouldn't have gotten that job. I can tell you that right now. I had no business experience whatsoever. And it's funny too, because a big company like that, I think they had 3,000 or 4,000 employees, something like that. It was a huge public company. Head of human resources was not involved in my process at all. And I remember going in there and I had to meet with her, I think a couple of days before. So I go in there and she says, "You're not going to last more than 2 weeks here." And I said, "Why not?" And she said, "You're too soft." So I said, "Oh, what does that mean?" And I thought about it and I went home and thinking, am I really soft? I said, I don't know. And again, I think what she was saying is, it is intimidating. I came in with this incredible team, no experience. And I'm reporting to this incredible, brilliant person. And maybe she could just sense that I was a little scared about the whole thing, but that actually motivated me also to make sure that I lasted as long as I wanted, which is exactly what happened.
How does it feel years later to get your own spiral notebook or your own spiral letter in the mail from a guy named Miguel?
That's a great one. Miguel Perez is this incredible person who's in Florida, and he wrote me this letter. He listened to my shows. He's listened to interviews and clips, and he did the work. And he wrote me this incredible letter. It was tabbed. It was spiral bound. And imitation is the best form of flattery, but the guy did the work. You could tell he put in 20 hours of work, 40 hours of work. And when I finally met with him, he said to me, he wrote this letter and he said, "I'd like 15 minutes of your time." It came FedEx too, and we'll talk about that in 1 second. The art and importance and massive importance of FedExing a thank you letter. We'll punt that for 1 second.
All right.
And he said, will you give me 15 minutes of your time? So I read this thing. I said, holy cow. And I wish I had it to show people. It's in a drawer somewhere. And I have it scanned somewhere as well because I teach and I show it to people. I said, no to 15 minutes. I'll give you as long as you wanted. And we talked for 60 minutes. He said, I'd like to fly out there to meet with you. And I said, actually, and he's not, and I don't think he would mind me saying this, because if he did, then I wouldn't say it. But he wasn't working. He was in school. He was engaged, paying for his own wedding, and didn't have a whole lot of money. So I knew a $500 plane ticket out here would be a tough thing for him to do. I said, well, I'll actually pay for you to come out here. I want to meet with you. And it turned out I was going to Florida. So I met him in Florida. We had a phenomenal meeting. I met with him 3 or 4 times since then. I talk to him regularly. I'm coaching him. I'm mentoring him. And it's been very rewarding to me. And when I get a letter like that, it says, wow, someone really wants to do the work. So I've received 3 of these in the last 2 years.
Wow.
And one of the things also, it's when you've done well in your career, and I'm sure you guys get the same thing, is people reach out to you on LinkedIn, right? Oh, I see you're a venture capitalist. I'm a student. I was wondering if you had 15 minutes of your time. I'm interested in going into VC. So unfortunately, even though I love giving back, I love coaching, I have a summer intern program, it's life-changing, I can't take these meetings. I unfortunately don't. I'm running 5 companies. I have a podcast. I'm writing a book. I have my philanthropy. So I just can't do it. But you can earn a meeting with me by doing the work. And the meetings have gone very well. I've had these 3 people who wrote the letters. I'm mentoring them. Offered one a job, actually, here. Didn't take it. I think it'll be a long-term mistake, by the way. They're not asking for a job. They're asking for advice. They're asking to spend time with me. And they're giving me the respect of doing the work. 10 hours, 20 hours. Miguel, 50 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Let's talk about one thing as well, about doing things that nobody has done before you. And when I give a lot of these coaching and the advice to students or young professionals or even CEOs, there are these norms and people don't want to break the norms. They say, no one does that, so I really don't want to do that. And when you think about no one does that, my response is always, maybe you should. And it's definitely true in the context. People will criticize you. Well, no one's done that before. They're looking down on you. And that's always should be a sign of, well, maybe you should do this. And so one of the things that I coach people on is you have to write a handwritten thank you letter no matter what. Okay. And if you're city to city and this is a Zoom, you write it, you get in the car, you drop it off. Same day, we've talked about that. Okay. If you're in a different city than somebody, FedEx the thank you note. Now, how many times have people in their life ever received a FedEx thank you note? Now I get them on a fairly regular basis because I teach it and I coach it, and it's life-changing because you're going to be the only person who's ever sent somebody a FedEx thank you note. And the person receiving it, it'll be the first time they've ever received it. And whether you have if that letter is successful or not, that person is going to remember you forever. And it's a small world. That person is going to go off to another company someday. They're going to remember you and they're going to teach it to people as well. FedEx to thinking of how much is your time worth spending preparing for a job interview or meeting, whatever this is. Think about it, and what does it cost? What does it cost to send a FedEx letter? $25. Be some of the best $25 you ever spent in your entire life.
Wow. I love how practical and tactical that is. And it's definitely something that we will be stealing from you and taking on with us as we go into the rest of our business adventure.
Yeah. In 2021, let's pivot a little bit. You started hosting the In Search of Excellence podcast.
Yeah.
You've interviewed incredible guests,
Yeah.
Mike Tyson, Jason Derulo, Kevin O'Leary, Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
These are living legends.
Yes.
What does extreme preparation look like when it comes to the podcast?
Every person I've interviewed, without fail, have proactively said I'm the most prepared interviewer they've ever had.
Wow.
And I like to start off with what we talked about EPT.
Yeah, I got to write that one down.
Extreme preparation torpedo. And that means you want to blow them off their chair with the first question showing their research. Orlando Bravo, right? The most successful private equity investor probably in the world today. Graham Weaver, who is also on my show, is right up there as well. But he said to me right at the first question, said, Randy, nobody knows that about my background. Where did you get that from?
Wow.
And I've received that same response many times. Dean Grazioso, I interviewed him last week. It was the same thing. And by the way, I hit him with one. I hit him with a second one. I hit him with a third one. And it's sort of like boxing jabs now. Like I want to keep firing away the torpedoes, showing the preparation, because when you show the preparation, you get to ask questions that no one else has asked before. You've done the work. And you don't want to ask the same questions as everybody else has. If you read the podcast transcripts, and I do a ton of work, sometimes I'll read 800 pages of transcripts of previous podcast guests that I have coming up. And same questions over and over and over again. Be different. Do the work. You get to ask different questions. And all my guests have said, not only the most prepared, but I ask questions no one else has asked before. And it's a direct result of my extreme preparation. And it works because the meeting starts out at a high level and it stays there the entire conversation. And here's something else. My guests, they're all very successful. CEO of Goldman Sachs, he's got a limited amount of time. We got 60 minutes. Sean Payton, the coach of the Broncos, he said, all right, we're going to go 30 minutes. I said, Sean, who's a friend of mine, I said, I can't go 30 minutes. He said, okay, 45. So we're in there and, we're at the Denver Broncos practice facility. It was very cool for all the football fans. If you've never been to a professional football campus, it's one of the coolest things ever. But I'm in there and I'm talking to Sean again, question after question. They're all unique. He stayed for almost an hour. Sorry, more than. He stayed for 70 minutes. Tony Robbins, 2 hours.
Wow.
David Solomon, 90 minutes. The mayor of Los Angeles, man, that one was crazy scripted, right? And the mayor and now ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, it was the same thing. I had 45 minutes. And by the way, now I know what's going to happen. They're all going to stay longer. Dana White, okay, 2 hours and 20 minutes. And the only reason that we had to break at 2 hours and 20 minutes is he had to go to the bathroom. And then during the bathroom break, he lost track of time. And when I checked my phone, when he was going to the bathroom, his assistant had called me 11 times. Dana needs to leave now. Dana needs to leave now. Dana in the podcast now. I don't have the phone with me, by the way. And Dana said, holy shit, I got to leave. I'm supposed to be at this police union speech 60 minutes ago. But that's what happens. You do the work, people will stay longer. The podcasts go well, and hopefully all the people listen. This show will get through. My podcasts are long, but you'll learn a ton. It goes right up to the end. The quality stays the same, and some of the best stories and lessons come at the end.
Yeah, you do an amazing job. And
thank you.
leaning on the fact that you do an amazing job, while you were just speaking, I came up with a question on the fly, and I have no idea how it's going to land, but I'm going to go for it. If you were to prepare for an interview with Randy Kaplan, what is one question you would ask Randy that no one else would even think to ask him?
That's a phenomenal question. I'm going to have to come back to you on that one.
All right. Yeah, it's hard to answer on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, that's because I do ask. I said, what's the one question you wish I had asked you during the show? But that's a different question than you're asking, because at the end of this show, you can ask that question. There probably will be something that I wish you had asked me about. Maybe it's something I want to promote, like my book, which is coming out next year, Extreme Preparation. It hopefully will be a life changer for everyone that reads it. But I'll come back to you on that one. The question is, what's the one question that no one else has asked me that
If you were if you were to interview Randy Kaplan in the third person,
Yeah.
what is one question you would ask Randy that no one else would think to ask?
I'll have to.
Yeah, think on it. Let's talk about your book for a second. What is a principle from that book that maybe you haven't mentioned on any previous podcast before?
Yeah, this is going to be in my TED speech. That
Okay,
comes out
all right.
also in a few weeks. But there's really 5 steps to
Okay.
extreme preparation. Prepare to plan, number 1. Prepare to study, number 2. Prepare to practice, number 3. Prepare to shine, number 4. And prepare to persist, number 5.
Okay. Is there one that's more important than the others?
You know, here's the answer is no. They're all required. But here's one that people get wrong. Most people think that when your big event or meeting is finished, that's the end of your preparation, and that maybe aside from some immediate follow-up, your work is done. But the truth is, preparing to persist is equally or more important than any other step of extreme preparation. And it's the follow-up that often counts the most. You may not get the sale on the first time. You may not get it on the first second. You may not get the job interview the first time out, but you may get it the second, third, fourth time out. And I teach specific lessons on how to prepare to persist. And success isn't just about one sale. It's about building relationships that last a lifetime. And that's where a lot of people go wrong. They have the job interview. They don't get it. That's it. They don't even send them a note to follow. They don't send them a note asking for feedback. Now, a lot of people won't give you feedback. I give very direct feedback. Why? Because I want to tell people where maybe they could have done better or what would have worked. And I think it's very, very helpful. A lot of people don't give that feedback, but I encourage you to seek the feedback out. But you really have to take a long-term view of your career and what you're doing. And it's also true with friendships as well. Sometimes you meet people, you don't hit things off the right away. Maybe you look at them funny or they think you're something that you're not. And eventually you get to know people and people can see who you are. But in business, for sure, you got to think long term. It's not just about one meeting. It's not the outcome of that meeting. If you do get that sale, you want a second sale. You want a third sale. You want to sell to different divisions of the company. You want referrals from other companies based on successful relationships you have at your company or your customers. And that's a great way to get it.
So staying on what you said about this art of the follow-up, right? This continuing the preparation after the occurrence happened. I'm really interested to see how your feet move. So you interviewed Tony Robbins, like Mike said, who is one of our role models. We've gone to 6 of his events. I know that you promised him you were going to go to one of his.
Yeah.
So you should definitely do it because it's changed our lives drastically. I want to know, what did you do after that Tony Robbins interview? How did you follow up with him?
So Tony was great. And one thing that I think is really important is you need to give credit to where credit is due. And so this is also something where people go wrong. At our tech company, I raise money from individual angel investors. And a lot of these investors made 20, 30, 50, one made $200 million on that deal. And I really didn't get a thank you. I mean, I got 1 or 2 thank yous. That was it. But this is life-changing money for people. And I've heard them talk about the investment. Some of the investors said, "Oh yeah, I met them through a friend of a friend," and that doesn't sit well. It's really important that you give credit to people who help you. Never forget where you came from, and I never forget where I came from. I remember every couch I slept on. I remember every person who made a intro for me, and you really remember the people who helped you when you had nothing and were at the beginning of your career. Doug Evans is the guy that I met at a conference where Steve Wozniak was speaking, and I went to see Steve speak. I'd met him a few months before. He was talking about doing my show, and there's this guy in the back of the room, Doug, and he looked familiar, and he had started a company called Juicero, which raised $90 million for essentially a blender of healthy fruit and foods. I knew the story. It's famous on Silicon Valley in the venture capital world. I meet Doug, and we started talking about deals and venture firms and people being unfair. I mean, everyone loves a winner, but when things don't go well, people just pile on, right? It's one of these crazy things. People are not happy for successful people in many cases, and it's one of the things I talk about on my show on a regular basis. Doug and I became friends. I love Doug. By the way, he has a company called the Sprouting Company. I'm the investor in the company. Sprouts are very healthy to eat. It'll change your life. You can learn more about it on the sproutingcompany.com. I'm having lunch with Doug, and he's talking about he spoke at a Tony Robbins conference. Now, when I started my show 4 years ago, my number one guest that I wanted was Tony. I read a book of his freshman year at Michigan, Unlimited Power. It changed my life. So I thought, okay, I want Tony. I can't tell you how many times people told me, I'll introduce you to Tony. Okay, no problem. And by the way, come to this mastermind. Yeah, I spent $25,000. Tony is there. I'll introduce you. Everyone's friends with Tony. I'll do this, Tony that. People are largely full of shit. If you're going to promise something to somebody, do it. That's it. And I can't tell you how many people don't do that. And people remember that, by the way. If you're going to offer to help somebody, do it. If you don't want to do it or aren't going to do it, don't offer. Because that person, you're going to be a flake. You're going to be non-reliable. People are not going to like you. It's a horrible way to do business. So Doug's telling me he's speaking with Tony on stage. I said, "Oh, do you know Tony?" He said, "Yeah, we're good friends." I said, "Oh, wow." I said, "I'd love to have Tony on your show." "No problem." He said, "How well do you know Tony?" He said, "I know him pretty well." So that night, Tony leaves me a voicemail
What?
on my phone. Doug had called him. He said, "Hey, this is Tony. He's got that really deep voice." He said, "Hey, Doug Evans said some amazing things with you. Says you got this really cool podcast." He said, "I'd love to be on your show." Like, holy cow, man, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep for weeks.
That's awesome.
And so we scheduled the show, and the show went well. So your question is, what did I do when the show was finished? Well, I always like to give my guests special gifts. Dana White did my show, and in the Dana White show, Dana loved boxing growing up. When he was 14 years old, he watched the Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvelous Hagler fight. They did 3 fights, and that was when he just fell in love with boxing. He saw it on TV. So I went out and found a ticket stub for the first fight signed by both boxers.
Wow.
Oh my God.
All right. That cost me $1,000, by the way, but it was a special gift. For Tony, he had a book when he was younger that largely influenced his life, and the book was published in 1903. I went out, I found a first edition signed copy of that book, and I gave it to him as a thank you for changing my life, inviting me to his home to shoot the podcast, and helping my coaching career and credibility. And the fact that Tony on my show has opened up more doors for my show than I could have ever hoped for, and making my dreams come true by actually interviewing him is one of the coolest things ever.
Wow.
Ever. And so I get my guests nice gifts usually, but memorable.
That is amazing. Oh my God. That is just the coolest thing I've ever heard, and just another thing we're gonna have to steal from you, man. This is you're really just giving us so much wisdom right now and such practical ways of applying it. So I just want to say thank you.
There's one more thing that I want to say about this too. I've received as thank you notes little trinkets. So I went to Michigan. I'm a Michigan football fan. I interviewed this guy 10 years ago to help run Collar Card. It's a promotional products company that I own. It's a plastic credit card sized piece of plastic for reusable collar stays. Hotels use them, dry cleaners, sales conferences. Great product. People forget their collar stays men's on a regular basis. All men love the product. They get, oh my gosh, this is great. First they say, I wish I had thought of that, and then it goes in their wallet. So we could put a brand in men's wallet on a permanent basis for months, whatever the case may be. This guy comes in, bombs the interview, bombed it. Like, okay, you're done. He sends me a note 2 days later. I was so nervous. I was intimidated. I'm sorry. Can I get another crack at it? And he sent me this Michigan football, this small leather football, probably cost 20, 30 bucks, whatever, but I loved it. And I knew I was going to hire him before I brought him back in. Why? He knew he had bombed it. He came back to me. The letter back was great. And he sent this really cool football. That's how you make sales. That's how you get it done. You come back from a no with a big boom, and it turned into a yes. He stayed here for about a year. He did a good job. But that's how you do it. And people say, well, aren't you bribing somebody? People may take it that way. It's a judgment call. Should you do it? Should you not do it? That little Michigan football now is in my home office. I showed someone my home yesterday. They hadn't been there before, and we walked in the office and said, oh, that's a really cool football. And I told the story, and they loved the story. So you can think about doing something like that. It could be a little risky. It's a judgment call. But if you got nothing to lose, and this guy had nothing to lose, do it.
Wow, that's awesome. I also love the story that I heard about how you got. So you have another company called Sandy, which is the largest beach database in the world.
Yeah.
But can you tell everyone listening how you ended up getting the domain name that you wanted?
Yeah, so it was interesting. When domain names first came out 20-something years ago, you could buy them. And you could buy really cool names. And now, of course, we all know to get a cool name, it has to be something unique, or you got to buy it.
Yeah.
And so Sandy, we named the company Sandy because I thought it was a cool name. Sandy, Sandy, was the worst hurricane at one point in U.S. history. I think $80 billion in property damage. Some high number of people died. It had a negative connotation. So I thought, all right, well, what about Sande? What about Sandee? I thought, okay, that's an interesting name. So we look it up. It's owned by a realtor in Aurora, Colorado named Sandy Swanson. And so I called Sandy, and I didn't want her to know it was some well-to-do, wealthy guy trying to buy the name. So I had intern working with me, Ricky Horowitz, who's amazing. And he said, all right, I'm a student, I'm doing this project, and I want to buy the domain name. She was doing nothing. I mean, she was elderly. It was clear the website was terrible. It looked like, and Sandy, if you're out there and listening to the show, and I don't know if you're still with us today, no offense by this, but it looked like she hadn't sold a house in years. So I call her. Okay, it didn't work, not interested. My deceased husband, I think, bought this for me 20 years ago. It has sentimental value to me. Came back a year later after that, intern. And then I finally got on the phone and said, you don't sound like a student to me. I said, oh, well, and I kind of massaged it. I didn't say that I was a student. I didn't say that I wasn't a student. I just kind of let the comment fly by and pass. And so just persistence. After 7 years, here's something that happened too. So I thought I could get it by Goodwill. She didn't register the domain name Sandy Swanson, her name. So I sent her a email, said, you should register your name, which I could have registered and bartered for her, right? That would have been a much better name for her. And we built her a new website that was slick. It was great, and said, here's a link to a new website. So I was a good guy, did something I didn't have to do, told her she should get her own name, and then built her a website. She registered the domain name, still said no. And then I came back to her a year later, and she said, oh, she was very worried that it was going to be a pornography site. And I don't understand the link between sandy.com and pornography, but that was one of her main concerns. And so I convinced her, no, this is not going to be a pornography site. This is going to be a beaches site. And she finally sold me the name after 7 years, and tons and tons of trying. Again, persistence pays.
Yeah, we can relate to that. Not sure if you know our story, but we're on the current season of the reality show, The Amazing Race.
Yeah.
And it took us 7 years to make it on that show, and we sent in 5 audition tapes and got no after no after no. And we took your philosophy, and it once again proved true that if you keep going after it and you keep preparing and you keep putting in the work, anything truly is possible.
Love it.
How do you decide what to focus on and give extreme preparation to when everything feels important?
Well, first of all, you have to prioritize, because not everything is important. And it's some of the coaching I do, and one of the first things that I do is I'll sit down with somebody, and I want to know if they're single, are they in a relationship, are they married, do they have kids? Because you only have a finite number of time during the day to devote to whatever you're doing. Okay, if you're looking for a new job and you're unhappy with your job, we spend more time at work than with our families. So that's something you should prioritize. And by the way, you don't even have to be looking for a new job, but you should really prepare for your future, which means you should be learning new things regularly. On YouTube, you can learn whatever you want. There's free lessons, whatever the case may be. But some things are not important, right? I've got a podcast tomorrow, on Wednesday. I'm very focused on my podcast. I prepare, as you guys know, a ton of time. I had my TED Talk. Things just went by the wayside, right? I prioritized. I said, I got a TED Talk. I clawed out my mornings, and nothing interrupted it. My door's closed, my phone's off, my assistant knows, can't be bothered, can't be talked to. I'm in the zone. And so you do have to prioritize what's important to you. And once you do, you got to figure out, how much preparation do I need to do to be successful? Obviously, if it's not an important meeting, you don't have to spend 10 hours to something that is not material to you. But on the flip side, as we all know, that 15-minute meeting may change your life. So you don't know on a regular basis, but it really is, you need to write things down. Some people have said, oh my God, I have so much to do. I have anxiety. I really don't know where to focus. Well, the first step is use this pen, get a piece of paper, write it down. Because when you see things in writing, what we have to do, no matter what we do, when we have a target or a goal, you got to write it down. Hold yourself accountable, but it also helps you stay organized and focused, and really helps you prioritize and say, okay, well, you write all these things down, and then I'll say, as part of my coaching, all right, let's rank them, and put weighted averages on the ranking. It's not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 1 may be 60%, number 2 may be 20, and then it goes down from there, 5, 1, 1, 1, whatever the case may be. But it really, you got to focus, you got to prioritize, and then you really got to make the time and figure out where you need to spend your time. And I've coached people who have 2 kids and families or whatever, and most of the people I coach, I will not coach professionals who don't put their family first. Never. I put my family first. That's key for me. But it also decreases the amount of time you have to spend on your work. And you really got to focus. You really have to prioritize what you're doing.
That's great. I want to end this interview with one final question that you ask a lot of your guests, but I've never actually heard you answer it yourself.
Yeah.
And that is, if you could give one piece of advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
Do not let a single person ever tell you cannot do something. Anything is possible if you put in the work, you do things that other people don't do, you focus on the end goal, and you are literally focused on making sure it happens regardless of whatever challenges come your way.
Wow. That is a drop the mic moment right there, Randy. So thank you so much for all the wisdom you dropped on us today. You are an amazing human, and I can't wait for our audience to dive into your podcast and learn from all your guests, watch your TED Talk when it drops, and also pick up your book when that comes out. So we will keep everybody informed with the links in the bio. Randy, thanks for being here, brother.
Thank you, Randy.
Guys, congrats on all your success. Pumped on the show for you guys. Thank you for contacting me, and super excited to stay in touch and get together in person.
Sounds great, brother. Peace.
Peace. Appreciate you guys.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end.
If you like this episode of BSU, you'll probably also like this one right here. So give it a click. Yeah, just click it. All right. See you next time.
Peace.